All right, Nick, let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines. They just got some huge news, and I think it's going to be really key for this team going into next season. And we'll get into that story in just a moment. But speaking of the season, Nick, Michigan had an excellent season this year. They didn't quite make it to the big dance. That's where they wanted to be. But, as consolation prize, they did some good stuff this year. And that's why it leads me to my question I want to ask Michigan fans. Answer in the comments below. Would you rather go 1-11 and beat Ohio State, or would you rather go 11-1 and lose to Ohio State? No national championship or anything like that is on the table. Those are your only two options. So let us know in the comments below. But speaking of, Nick, what is the big news that Michigan just got?
Yeah, so of course, Michigan, known running football team, power football team, and Blake Corum was a superstar all year. I think he was actually going to be the Heisman front runner, potentially win the Heisman, until unfortunately he got hurt, and then of course he couldn't return in time to have any sort of big impact, even though he tried to stick it out in a few situations. But good news, according to the Spun, I'm going to read from the report here. Michigan star running back Blake Corum announced on Monday that he is returning to school for the 2023 season. Corum established himself as a Heisman candidate before late season injury cut his stellar campaign short. And this is what Corum said on Twitter. I'll quote him here. Quote, "I'm a Michigan man through and through. I love playing for the University of Michigan. I love going to the big house and leaving it all on the field. I love the community. I love interacting with everyone. It was a tough decision. It was a business decision. But I feel like I have unfinished business. I didn't like the way I went out in the big house. I don't like people remember being hurt, so I will be coming back for it all next year," unquote. All right, Maya. So obviously, Corum is a legitimate superstar. There's no denying that. You can give the O-line some credit because it's a very good offensive line, and obviously J.J. McCarthy running quarterback. The whole offense, there are a lot of good players there. But Corum is a legitimate superstar. I think if he plays against TCU, that game may end differently. I don't think they have that fumble near the goal line early on, of course. No, so I think getting Corum back is huge as his team looks to make another run at a third straight Big Ten title next season. Miles, obviously, this is great Corum news, but I mean, do you feel like this is just another jolt? Because I think Michigan fans probably are disappointed to get knocked out early in the college football playoff semifinal. But I think this could be some positive energy as they look toward the spring, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And you look at this offense, Nick. I think it is much, much improved with J.J. McCarthy at the helm. They're more explosive. You see them in that game, although they did lose against TCU. I just saw J.J. McCarthy make so many explosive plays. And as you said, if Corum's in that game, I don't even think it's close. I think they win that one hands down. A lot of the mistakes aren't going to be happening. But Corum is such a special player. You look at him this year, Nick. He had 1,400, almost 1,500 rushing yards, 18 touchdowns, running for 5.9 yards a carry. That's insane yards per carry right there. Like you said, he's a bona fide superstar, but I think he adds back that element. And I think, a whole offseason, gelling with J.J. McCarthy, they get that offense built up to the place that it needs to be. Because there was some back and forth in the quarterback situation. They didn't really know who they're going to start with for the whole season. McCarthy emerged as, the superior talent there. But I just think this Michigan team, now that they know what the plan is going forward, now that they know that all of the roles are filled, they're going to come into next season like 10 times stronger than they were this past season, Nick.
Yeah, and 100%, because people forget that Harbaugh's entire offensive strategy, the way he builds his team, is having a big, strong, physical running back that wears people down and then pops big runs when it's opportunistic. You go back to his San Francisco 49er days, he had Frank Gore. Obviously, at Stanford, he had Toby Gerhart. People kind of forgot about Gerhart, but he was a heck of a player. So obviously, I think Edwards, when he came in, replacing Corum, he's a really nice player, home run threat, but it's not the same as having that physical, tough, punishing runner. He punishes defenses, Mice. He wears them down. That's how they dictate their will. And while they scored a bunch of points against TCU, they really didn't dictate the will the way I think they would have with Corum. And that's why I think it would have been different, because Michigan's all about physically dominating you and just turning it into just this kind of almost a street fight and barreling you and mauling you with that offensive line. And that's what Corum kind of represents. And I think they lost a little bit of that identity. I think it really hurt them in the college football playoff semifinal. And getting Corum back will help restore that identity and bring it back next year as they make another run at this thing. And I think looking at it right now, I think they are far and away the favorite to repeat as Big Ten champions. And listen, the way things are going right now, potentially Georgia's going to graduate a lot of guys. I don't think TCU is coming back. Who's going to know? It's going to be hard to tell who's going to make the playoff next year, but I would not bet against Michigan. They look like a clear contender to make it to the playoff again and probably make a run at the national title.